Hello, I'm Päivi, a visual artist from Finland, and this time I have a short demo for you. I've been creating a lot of watercolor paintings recently, especially floral watercolor paintings, and I also have an upcoming class called Floral Fantasies in 3 stars. It has a lot of different projects about painting and drawing flowers, and the idea in this class is that we embrace the abstract quality of the flower and that way get looser. And also another theme is that we slow down a bit and allow art to calm us down. So I'm showing a quick demo, but first I show a couple of paintings so that you can get the idea. So here's one of my floral things. This is the project that I'm showing in detail in my class. And so I've made several projects. I have a lot of these, and I also have made bigger pieces. Big ones. And I also put some of those in the video so that you can get inspired. The idea here is that we walk on the meadow and discover all kinds of flowers. The first few layers take a bit of time to dry, but then all the fun part begins. Now the paper has absorbed most of the water, and the surface can still be quite wet, but there should not be any puddles or such, and the paper should lie flat on the surface. I use 2 brushes. One is round brush with a very thin tip, and another is this flat brush. And I use this broader flat brush first. I mix some colors on a palette and take some colors just straight from the pans. The idea here is to use a lot of different pastel tones. I use also a lot of water so that the color will be pastel. I don't just fill the whole surface but leave some areas blank. And when using a flat brush, the effect can be quite bulky, like there are blocks of color, and that's actually really good base for the painting, to have these kind of blocks of color. Just enjoy colors, make sure to use enough water, and if you're unsure, you can also spray a bit of water so that you make sure that you have enough water, and this way you can also get some beautiful blooms and some happy accidents. Now it's important to let this layer dry properly. Keep the back side of the paper wet, let the top side of the paper dry. Now this has been drying for an hour or so, and the center is quite dry. The edges are still a bit wet, but it doesn't matter so much because we start the painting so that the edges will be more blurry than the center. So your edges can be still wet, and if they've curled up, just add some water so that they lay flat. In this layer we'll be using more neutral colors, not so bright colors. So the first layer was pastels, and now we're using more muted colors. So I have all kinds of browns on my palette, and I mix them with brighter colors so that I get muted tones. Now we're painting every edge a bit different and using different tones of browns and greys. So my first edge is warm brown. And my next corner is warm green. And then I have the greyish blue corner. and then cool green corner. And then I blend out these brush strokes. I also add a little bit of water there, so that it will have some happy accidents. And I can also add a little bit of color there, so when I have pink there, I can also add some pink. There I have some orange. Also add some orange there where the water is. The idea is here that the color will spread out. Because there's so much water, these are very subtle. Just adding a little bit of color there so that it will have some shapes that will inspire me to paint the next layer. So I haven't touched the center, I've just painted the edges. This is just one layer of the many. Now I let this dry again. Now I've waited for a long time for the paper to dry, and it's still a bit damp near the edges, but the center and most part of it is quite dry. There's one puddle over there, but I don't mind that. It will dry and I can just spread it when I go there. And the idea here is now that we start to see the flowers, we start to see all kinds of beautiful shapes here, and we start to highlight them. So I'm focusing on a very small area, and I don't try to make this big picture look like something. I'm just focusing on a very small area at a time, and I'm used to work from this edge forward. So I'm starting here. I start to focus on this small area, and when here's some blue, I continue by adding blue here so that I can make some kind of stem there. So I'm digging out all the beautiful organic shapes that can be found here, and the idea is to really focus on a small area, because you know it's the same when you're walking on a meadow. If you look just the big meadow, you don't see all the pretty flowers that I can see there. I'm embracing their individuality. And I use quite a lot of water, and I also like to use neutral colors too, because here when I'm painting the background more than the actual flowers, I want the flowers to really come up. I find this kind of painting very relaxing and inspirational too, because many times when we're struggling with the big picture, this is a really good exercise to remember that art is about nuances, not so much about control. Every time I glance at the big picture, the whole paper, it feels overwhelming. How could I make this a flower painting? But when I focus on this small area, it feels so natural. It's like these subtle changes of colors and subtle pastels tell another story that if I'm just calming down and start following it, they will help me, and I don't have to worry about the composition so much. When you've been working with the pale colors, they are very subtle. You have to look very carefully, but when you look carefully, you can see all kinds of beautiful shapes that really make the painting. Sometimes just adding a shape can make you see subtle changes. So here, when I have very pale areas, I just add some shapes and build the picture there. Often there are beautiful shapes near the edges, but I don't usually use them because the idea is that the viewer will look at the center, and the shapes and elements and flowers can be more subtle when you move towards the edge. One quarter has been done for this layer, and I'm just focusing on the top quarter and then moving on. So here I have the puddle, so I'm just spreading it a bit. I could also use a paper towel to dry it, but just make the most of it here. Then I also like to leave some of the areas a bit more undefined than others. So this quarter can be quite blurry. I don't work so carefully there. So now I've filled this paper, and the next thing is that I'm going to add darker colors. But if you want to take a break, now it's a good time. It's really good if this dries a bit before moving on. It's time to add darker colors. If you look at the flowers on a meadow, the shadows are really dark. The idea now is to add that darkness. And at the same time, I try to make the colors more diverse so that I use many tones when I'm adding the darks. Add dark colors near the best details that you can now see, so that they get highlighted. Now, when I've been painting with very neutral tones, you can see how the subtle pastel colors really start to come up. So now it's time to add even more darker colors and brighter colors, and now we can start looking at the big picture more. So for example, here I see some kind of peony type of flower. I want to bring that up a bit. Try to keep my pans quite wet so that I can get some really thick paint now. So now I've added some darker colors, and I also add some brightness here. Again, my paint is quite thick, so the color is really intensive. Then I also like to tone down some of the areas. Here on the bottom I could tone down a bit of these. Now I let this dry a bit and then I finish it with little finishing touches. Hello, I'm Päivi Eerola and I want to welcome you to this class, Floral Fantasies in 3 Styles. In this first week we are imagining that we are graphic illustrators, graphic designers, designers of all the beautiful things. In this week we are expressing ourselves with watercolors, and we are doing that in an intuitive way. We use very little photographs, we create freely, and we try to get as loose as possible and as imaginative as possible. For the next 2 weeks, we'll spend time in another world. In the world of Renaissance and in the world of fantasy, and we are creating slow art. This is like an adventure. I want to show you some of the paintings that are in the different phases, so that you can compare your piece and you can also contemplate the similar things that I do here.